Okay, so welcome, and we're about to get started. Thanks for joining us for our class today, and I hope that you are doing well and enjoying your very good Tuesday. Today is Tuesday, happy Tuesday, and today we'll join for another discussion. We're going through 50 topics in Judaism to understand them, to delve a little deeper in our Jewish life and observance. And the discussion that we're going to bring up today is, why is a God-fearing person praiseworthy? Isn't fear a negative emotion? Why isn't love enough? That's the question that we want to raise and talk about today. So, before we get started, I'll take a moment and welcome you. Thank you for joining us in today's discussion. And please use the chat to let us know where you're watching from, what's going on. I hope you're doing well. Hello, Noah. Thank you for joining us. Hello, Shmuley Tachtel. Thank you for joining us. Or Tachtel from Arizona. So please let us know where it is you're tuning in from, and give us some likes, give us some comments, and be a part of the conversation. So today's topic is about fear. Why does Judaism say we need to fear God? Isn't fear a negative emotion? Shouldn't love be enough? But before we dive into today's discussion, I want to bring a daily reminder about our Kabbalah class that we're offering in the fall semester with Judaic Studies. I'll be teaching a class on Kabbalah for Judaic Studies. The course code is JST 3210. You could join a fascinating fully online Kabbalah class. It's not going to be meeting in person. There's no Mondays, Thursdays, 3 to 4:15, none of that. Just modules that you get to use on your own. Go at your own pace, be involved in discussions, watch some videos, play some games, and learn a lot about the Kabbalah. So it's open right now. You can sign up for fall semester. It's a fully online course. I know today, with COVID and all that's going on, no one knows exactly how courses are going to look like, or what classes are going to be in person or not. This one is not going to be in person. I think it will be fascinating. So please join if you can. Again, course code JST 3210. So before Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, he tells the Jewish people in the book of Devarim, in the book of Deuteronomy, he tells the Jewish people, and I'll quote from you, Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 12. Moses tells the Jewish people, "And now, Israel, what does God require from you but to fear God, to walk in all his ways, to love him, and to serve God with all your heart and with all your soul?" Now, the easy part is to love God, to walk in his ways, to love him, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. That's stuff we can relate to. That makes sense to us. And that is something that we would imagine that being in a relationship with God means, that you need that. But why must we fear God? What's this concept Moses is telling the Jewish people, that you must fear God? You know, it reminds me of the famous, often quoted saying in the name of FDR, President Roosevelt. He said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." Why does God command us to fear him, and why isn't love enough for our relationship with God? Okay, so that's kind of the driving question that we have today, is what's up with this business of needing to be afraid of God, or fear of God? So just to start off, and to start the conversation, I just want to bring to your attention that fear isn't necessarily always a negative. In fact, in many cases, fear can be very important. If someone fears for example, if someone fears putting their hand in a fire, this is a good fear, because if you put your hand in a fire, it's going to get burnt. And you don't want that to happen. That's bad. And being afraid of putting your hand in a fire is a very good thing. Being afraid of harming yourself is a very good thing. On the other hand, fear can prevent someone from acting out on their true desires and values, in which case fear can be a very negative thing. So fear can be good, fear can be bad. For example, if you're too afraid, when you see someone being bullied and you're too afraid to speak up and say something, that's negative. If you want a promotion and you think you deserve a pay raise and you're too afraid to approach the boss and to say you need something, if you're in classroom and you're too afraid to voice your voice to get what your answers met, that's a bad fear. But certain fears, like being afraid of burning yourself in a fire, that is actually good. If the fear has a positive outcome, we can generally classify it as a positive fear. When we are taught that our relationship with God requires fear, obviously we're talking about positive fear. We can assume that we mean a positive fear, one that helps rather than hinders our relationship with God. So we're talking about a positive fear here. But still, we need to understand how is it that fear actually helps our relationship with God. More than that, we also need to understand why loving God isn't enough. Okay? Why do we must have fear? Why is fear a crucial component? Why isn't love enough to make the relationship work? Okay? So a lot of times when people use the word fear of God, what do they mean? When you say, this person is God-fearing, or I'm afraid of God. Hi, Zach. Thank you for joining us and being a part of the conversation, being here. Hi, David. Thank you for joining us. Again, please like, comment, let us know you're here, where you're watching from, what's going on. So when people hear the word fear of God, they usually think of fear of punishment. Okay? Whether in this world, that if you do something that God doesn't like, God will punish you in the here and now, or whether in the next world, that you won't go to heaven or whatever it might be. So it could be in this world, it could be in the next world, but it means you're afraid of a punishment. And we don't have time right now to go into great length into the notion of God's rewards and punishments, but we do need to briefly state a few points so that we know what we're talking about. Okay? It is point number one. There is a principle in Jewish faith that God rewards and punishes. That is a principle of Jewish faith. Okay? Reward and punishment, another principle, another key to know, is that reward and punishment can take place either here in this world while we're in the corporal reality, while we're soul in a body in this physical world as we are right now, or it could also take place in the afterlife. Another point, punishment is not about God's wrath or things like that people oftentimes think that, if you do something wrong, God's going to get you back. In Judaism, that's not how we think of it. In Judaism, punishment is an act of kindness. Punishment is a cleansing process for the soul. The soul's mission and what it wants most is to cleave to God, is to be close to God. Sin is something that doesn't allow the soul to connect to God or to cleave to God well. Much like if you have a piece of tape, once you get it a little bit dirty and soiled, it doesn't stick so well anymore, right? So you need to clean it off. You need to sanitize it. You need to clean it in order that it connects better, it adheres better. And therefore, punishment is not an act of wrath, but an act of love, allowing the soul, once it goes through the punishment, once it gets cleaned up, so to speak, it's able to connect to God in a much more profound way. And reward and punishment is not about God getting us back. One last point, it's actually a direct consequence of our actions. We're not getting something, it's not tit for tat, but if you pour hot water on your foot's going to burn. It's not that you want, it's just a mere consequence of the action you did. If you don't want your friend to be bird scalded in hot water, then don't pour hot water over your feet, right? It's not a punishment that your feet get burnt when you pour hot water on it. You take a pot of hot water and you pour it on your feet, you're going to burn because you just poured hot water on your feet. So punishment in Judaism isn't about a wrath, but it is about getting the consequences of the action that you did. Sleeping in the bed you made, getting the result of what you made happen. Okay? So, does the obligation to fear God mean that we need to be fearful of punishment? When we say be afraid of God, it means be afraid God's going to punish you. What does it mean to be afraid of God? Most people, when you say fear of God, they usually think of fear of punishment. So on the one hand, fear of punishment is promoted in the Torah and in subsequent Jewish works because it is better to do the right thing because you're afraid of punishment than not do the right thing at all, right? So even though it might be not the deepest way to connect, but if the fear of punishment is going to keep you on the straight and narrow, then that could have a net positive. Because if that's what stops you from doing silly things, or that's what stops you from going against what God wants and keeps you on the straight or narrow, if fear of punishment stops you from murdering, stops you from stealing, stops you from cheating, or committing any other act of transgressions like eating not kosher or keeping Shabbat, desecrating the Shabbat, it could be a positive. At the same time, this motive, the motive of following God's commandments because you're afraid of punishment, is by no means the ideal way to celebrate your Judaism. As let's look how the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, phrased it. This is the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe in the Chabad movement, and listen, the way he phrases it is like this, and I quote from one of his discourses. He writes, "Although fear of punishment is a selfish concern, nevertheless, it is not completely bad." Okay? So fear of punishment, the way he puts it, is just that. Fear of punishment. A concern about losing your money, losing your health, losing your comfort, and so on and so forth. That is not really fear of God. That's afraid of a consequence, and you don't want your life to be bad, so you are afraid of something bad happening to you. What you're really afraid of is yourself. What you're really concerned of is yourself. You're concerned with consequences coming your way. You're not really concerned with God. And it is immature, a type of fear, and definitely not the ideal. That being said, like we said, the litmus test for a positive fear is, does it make you have the right outcome? And if it gets you to a positive outcome, then at least the results are good. So you might still consider it an okay way of doing things, but obviously it's a very immature way of doing things. If the effect of the fear of punishment is one that you refrain from committing wrong because one of us is afraid of the repercussions, then the net outcome is good, which is why the Rebbe Rashab says that this type of fear is not completely bad. He says if this is what you're down to, if this is the only thing that's going to stop you, if this is the last holding thing, and if not for the fear of punishment, you would act out and do the wrong thing, and the only thing that's holding you straight and narrow is the fact that you are afraid of punishment, then it's not the ideal way to do things, but at least you are doing the right thing. Okay? So, if all else fails to prevent us from transgressing, we can at least rely on a type of fear of punishment, which will at least allow us to be able to do the right thing in the moment, and that's very important. That is something that is good. Okay, so that's how we see that. It's immature, but it's part of life. And if it helps, it could be good. Right? They say a story of a new employee that starts working. He's on his first day of the job. And as he's on the first day of the job, he calls down to the cafeteria and he screams into the phone. And he says, "Bring up a burger and fries. on the double, quick, 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 I need it now. So the voice on the other side asks, do you know who you're calling? So he says, I have no idea. So he says, well, this is the CEO. And obviously the new employee's first day in his job, he's freaking out. He's like, oh my God, what the heck did I just do? I just, the worst possible case scenario. What's going to happen over here? So he turns into the phone and he says, do you know who's calling? Do you know who you're talking to? He asks the CEO. So the CEO says, no. So he says, well, good. Let's keep it that way. And he clicks the phone and hangs it up. Right? That's fear of punishment. Right? So returning to our question, why is fear of punishment necessary? Why does Moses in Deuteronomy, in the verse that we read before, why is he saying that we need to have punishment? We need to have fear of God, assuming it's fear of punishment. Why is it that this is necessary? Why is it that this is important? Why is fear needed? Isn't love good enough? Wouldn't you want the relationship with God to be built based off of love? Okay? So, just to summarize where we're at right now, fear of punishment is not the ideal type of fear because it is mainly a concern of yourself, not for God. However, if fear of punishment gets you to the place where you're actually doing the right thing, then if it gets you to do the right thing, then at least it's getting you to do the right thing, and that's what matters, and it could be a net positive if that's the only thing that's going to keep you on the straight and narrow. Okay? Let's see this in a different context, and this might help us understand this and connect with it in a more profound way. Okay? What is up with fear? Is fear necessary in a relationship? So before we can understand it about God, let's try to understand about fear, or let's talk about relationships in general. Is love enough to sustain a relationship? If you're in a relationship, let's take the primary example of a relationship. In a marriage, is love enough to sustain a relationship? So the answer is going to depend on how we define love. There's a difference between mature love and which will include elements of respect and sincere commitment, and immature love, which is more like infatuation, or what many might refer to as being in love. It's really an immature love. The focus is not on the other person, but on how the other person makes us feel. In other words, it is self-love. Harboring this type of love does not necessarily imply that the lover is malicious or doing something wrong, but for multiple reasons, it is a self-directed love, and it is not enough to sustain a relationship. Okay? Self-love is basically objectification, using the other person for personal gain. A true relationship cannot take hold with such a selfish attitude. It really is all about myself. I like the way you make me feel, and therefore I need you around. That is selfish. That's infatuation. That's not love. It's not real love. Self-love is highly volatile. If I love you because of what you're giving me, then the moment I'm not getting what I want, that love is over. It's up to my mood swings. If I want something different this morning, then everything changes. If I change my attitude towards things, then everything is different. And then your love is all over a map. They say a story of a woman that rushes home one day from work and she tells her husband, pack your bags. I won the lotto. So the husband turns to his wife and he says, honey, what should I pack? Should I pack the skiing gear? Should I pack a bathing suit? Where are we going? So she says, pack everything. You're getting out of here, right? I don't need you anymore. I won the lotto. I want you, right? It's not really about the other person. I'm out. So mature love, on the other hand, is focused on the other. You could say like this, that mature love combines the passion and excitement of love with the dignity and the ability and with the dignity and the stability to provided by the second motor, the second crucial element of marriage, which is respect. Love is not enough. What you need is really love and respect. Of course, you need the passionate, exciting, romantic aspects of a relationship. That is the glue that holds everything together. But ultimately, that's not enough. Ultimately, you need to have it coupled with respect. And in fact, that is how a real relationship works. Okay? And that's what differentiates a good relationship from a bad one. You need to have the love, of course, the romance, of course. That's the glue that holds a marriage together. That's what makes marriage different than any other type of relationship. Otherwise, it can turn into a cold, calculated thing, impersonal. However, without the incorporation of sincere dedication and respect, passion and excitement are insufficient to sustain a happy and healthy marriage. Respect, a commitment to each other that transcends the subjective feeling, moves the relationship from being me-focused to you-focused, me-focused to us-focused, and is a very crucial part of the relationship. This is especially important in that it can carry the relationship during those times when you're not feeling in a very loving mood precisely right now. The same is true in our relationship with God. If we're asking why love isn't sufficient, and then we are probably thinking of immature love. The answer is self-evident. If you only have love for God, then your relationship with God is based on your mood swings. And when you feel loving to God, and when you're in the mood of God, and when you're feeling connected to God, and when you feel inspired, everything is great. But what holds you in the relationship? What reminds you of the importance of the relationship? Not just when you're excited and having a good day and everything, all the stars are aligned and everything is perfect, and then you're in the game. And if it's, one morning you wake up and I'm just not in the mood, you're grumpy, you're not interested in getting up and praying, or you're not interested in getting up and doing what God wants. You have your own agenda today. You just couldn't be bothered by God for right now. So this becomes very immature and becomes very volatile. When we need more than that. We also require respect, commitment, honor, and so forth, which we can perhaps call in Hebrew yira, loosely translated as fear, but I would suggest that fear wouldn't be the precise translation. A better translation might be awe. Okay? So just to summarize before we move on to awe and describing what that's about, love, which means passion and excitement, alone is not enough to sustain a relationship. A relationship requires honor and respect, a commitment to the other that transcends our fleeting feelings. And when we base everything on love, then it could be fleeting, it could be volatile, it could be all over the map. But when we incorporate respect and honor, commitment, that is what allows us to be able to continue and sustain a relationship over the long term. And it works like that in interpersonal relationships with our spouses, and it also works that way with our relationship with God. So let us take a look at what Maimonides, the Rambam, tells us about yira, which we were translating as fear until now, but now we'll try to see it as in the sense of awe. Okay? So Maimonides writes in his book Mishnah Torah, in the laws of the foundations of the Torah, he writes like this, and I'll quote what he writes. Okay? What is the path to loving him and fearing him? What's the path to loving God and fearing God? When we contemplate God's great and wondrous creations, and perceive thereby his infinite wisdom that surpasses all comparison, we will immediately love, praise, and acclaim God, and we will yearn with tremendous desire to know him. As King David stated, "My soul thirsts for the living God." When we continue to reflect on these matters, we will immediately recoil in awe. We will appreciate that we are a tiny, humble creature standing with a flimsy and limited wisdom before he who is of perfect knowledge. As David stated, "When I see your heavens, the work of your fingers, I wonder, what is man that you shall recall him?" So at the one hand, you look at the world, you look at God's creation, you look around, and you see the vastness of it, and you come to love God and see how amazing he is. At the same time, when you start thinking about yourself, you realize how small you are, how little value you bring, and you feel very small before God, and this makes you recoil in awe, as Maimonides says. Maimonides, the Rambam, is not speaking here of fear of punishment, as we spoke about earlier. He is talking about something entirely different. What we call in Hasidic lingo, yiras haroimimus, fear of the sublime. In fact, the word fear seems inappropriate here. The word awe seems like a much better word, even if it's not perfect. Maimonides is describing something that is similar to the feeling aroused when we perceive the vastness of even the physical vastness, like a gorgeous horizon, a huge mountain, the galaxies and cosmos. The feelings are hard to describe, but affect us in a very real way. If we feel that way when we think about the universe, imagine how much more profound the feeling can be when we think about God himself, the creator of the universe, for whom the entire universe is but a blip on the radar. So why is this awe needed? Why is this awe needed? So if a woman tells you that she loves her husband very, very deeply, she's deeply in love with her husband, but then you find out that she has no clue that he won a Nobel Prize for discovering a medication that saved thousands of lives. What does that tell you about her love? A prerequisite to any relationship is to know the other person as much as possible. Yiras Hashem, awe of God, is a direct result of knowing something about who God is. A person who not only loves God, but a person who only loves God but experiences no awe does not really know who he's in love with. If you want to relate to God, we need to realize the reality that the lack of awe indicates our blindness to the reality of what God really is. God is not our neighbor. He's not our mother. He's not our spouse. He is infinitely greater. Our relationship with him has to reflect this truth. Love, the driver to become close, does not suffice for that relationship. The love needs to be balanced by a sense of awe for his greatness, an understanding of how great God is, and by understanding how great God is, that will create awe. Ahava, love, is extremely important in our relationship to God. But this love must also be grounded in the reality of the being who God is, the being that we're having a relationship with. The relationship flourishes on love, but it must be based off of awe. So this is the concept. When we understand how vast God is, how great God is, that's going to make us realize at the same time how small we are, how insignificant in God's presence we are. And that makes us experience awe. And that shows that we really do have an understanding of what God's really all about, and helps us build a relationship that lasts, not just when I'm in the mood, but throughout. The truth is that there is more to this awe. Yira, this awe, is not about being, is not only about being in touch with the reality of the greatness or awesomeness of God, it is knowing at the same time that this infinite, unfathomable God is paying attention to you, that you make a difference. He's waiting for you to do a mitzvah, despite his greatness. He relies on me and you to come through to fulfill the purpose of creation. In other words, yira, awe, is the realization of a powerful, very powerful paradox. And on the one hand, I'm nothing in compared to God. At the same time, I am so important in God's eyes that God needs me for the purpose, to fulfill the purpose of creation. And if I don't do what I need to do, then I'm leaving God hanging, so to speak. And this realization only intensifies the awe of realizing how small we are, but at the same time how important we are to the story of creation. Imagine you visit an observatory, a space observatory, and you are absorbed in looking at the stars, galaxies, planets, and the vastness and the beauty is captivating. You're overwhelmed. You are emotionally stirred, and you cannot take your eyes off what you're seeing. You feel tiny. You're in awe of the vastness of the universe. But then suddenly, you notice something. As you focus more, it becomes clearer and clearer. No, you're not dreaming. This is actually real life. Your name is written out in the alignment of the star and the planets. Your awe is now quadrupled. Paradoxically, you'll feel so small, yet so grand, so minute, and so grand simultaneously. In this, I want to bring from you a quote of the Alter Rebbe, the founder of the Chabad movement, where he writes in the Tanya, and he tries to give us this understanding of how we're supposed to be relating to God. And he writes in the Tanya chapter 41, contemplate the greatness of the Infinite One, that his kingship extends to all worlds, both higher and lower, and that he fills all worlds and encompasses them all. Consider further that God leaves everything aside and uniquely bestows his kingship upon you in particular. Indeed, a person must say, this world was created for my sake. Consider further that you ought to accept his kingship upon yourself, that he be king over you, so that you serve him and do his will. Consider further that God stands over you, and he looks at you and your innermost thoughts and emotions to determine if you are serving him as is fitting. And this is kind of the concept, is that, yes, God is so great and we are so small in comparison. But at the same time, this vast and infinite God is looking to me and you and waiting for us. What are we thinking? What are we speaking? What are we doing? And he needs us, because he chose to need us to fulfill the purpose of the world. They say a story of two young boys. They were very mischievous. They always got into trouble all the time. No matter what happened, if something was going wrong in town, these two boys were at it. And one time, their mother had enough. And she said, you know what? I'm going to take you guys to the rabbi. The rabbi is going to set you straight. She schleps the younger one to the rabbi's office, goes to the house, goes to his study, knocks on the door. And the rabbi says, yes, how can I help you? The mother says, listen, my kids are always the problem kids of town. I need you to set them straight. The rabbi says, sure, leave him with me. I'll speak to him. The mother leaves the room, and the rabbi gets up, and he looks sternly at the boy, and he says, do you know where God is? And the boy doesn't say anything. He's like looking at the rabbi. The rabbi gets even more serious, and he raises his voice a drop, and he says, my son, do you know where is God? The boy's mouth drops open, but he doesn't say a word. And the rabbi gets up and nodding his finger, he says, "Boy, you better answer me. Do you know where your God is?" The boy freaks out, screams at the top of his lungs, and dashes for the door and runs home. And he meets his older brother, and he tells his older brother, "Brother, we got a serious problem. God is missing, and they think we did it." Right? So the reality is that ultimately God needs us. God needs us to fulfill his mission. When we deeply contemplate this awesome reality of God and the fact that he wants a relationship with us, this leads us to the fear that we're talking about. Not a fear of trepidation or paralysis, the feeling we often associate with negative fear, but rather a sense of the greatest honor and responsibility and urgency to commit wholly and fully to serving God and doing what it is that he wants. This sense of fear, of awe, comes to the realization of the great purpose for which he, despite of his infinitude, entrusted us. He gave us a powerful, important responsibility, and we are left with a profound feeling of privilege and commitment that comes with knowing that he is standing over us lovingly, waiting to see if we will fulfill the mission that he created us for. So just to summarize, love is crucial to our relationship with God, but for the relationship to be genuine, so acknowledge his awe-inspiring transcendence. Our relationship with God flourishes our love, but it must be born out of reverence and awe. And the last point is that our awe is intensified when we contemplate that this infinite, unfathomable God desires a relationship with us and awaits our fulfillment of our life's purpose. That wraps up today's class. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed. I know it was a little bit of a longer class than typical, but I think it's an important subject and something that's often misunderstood. And I hope we now have a better understanding of what we mean when we say be God-fearing. Be God-fearing, we don't just mean be afraid of God, he might punish you, but we mean much more than that. Realize how central you are to the story of the universe, how amazing God is, how infinite God is, but at the same time, how crucial you are to the story. That sense of responsibility creates that awe that we're talking about. And that's what we're talking about when we say that God-fearing love isn't enough. Tomorrow's discussion, if you want to join us, is why do Jewish law recognize matrilineal descent as the deciding factor for Jewish identity? So traditional Judaism says that in order to be Jewish, your mother's got to be Jewish. Right? You have a Jewish father, your mother is not Jewish. According to Jewish law, halachically, you're not Jewish 100%. You should still go through a conversion of sorts to solidify that your Jewishness. But if your mother is Jewish, or your mother's mother is Jewish, or your mother's mother's mother was Jewish, even if you haven't practiced Judaism ever, you're still 100% Jewish as Moses. Why does Judaism and Jewish law recognize matrilineal descent as the deciding factor of people's Jewishness? That is the subject of tomorrow's discussion. Please join us. We'll try to be closer to 12:30 tomorrow, depending on what else is going on. So please join us. And one last thing I want to talk about, as we do every day, is that we have 18 days left to our annual summer raffle. Our annual summer raffle helps support the good work that Chabad does for Jewish students on campus at UCF in Valencia. By buying a raffle ticket, you are giving a virtual hug the college students, helping them have a community, a place to connect, a place to learn, a place to experience, a place to get good Shabbat dinners and a sense of community, a place that they can turn to for mezuzahs or in times of crisis, a shoulder to lean on and things like that. Even through this pandemic, COVID, we've been giving out 50, 60 Shabbat dinners every single week. Students come by on Fridays afternoons and pick up a Shabbat dinner or a 4-course meal in a box or a bag to go. They're going to celebrate Shabbat with their families, with their roommates or themselves in their apartments or with their roommates. We give out wine and challah, grape juice if they're under 21. We also give out matzah bowl soup and gefilte fish and salads and noodles and chicken and a full Shabbat dinner, including dessert. And that is made possible by caring people like you. So I would like to encourage you to buy some tickets. You can go to jewishucf.com/raffle. You can buy some tickets yourself. You could ask your parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, anybody that wants to buy a raffle ticket. Ticket starts at $36 each. And you're an automatic winner because you win the mitzvah of being there for Jewish students. And you also get a chance to win other great prizes like $10,000 tickets for to Israel, $1,000, $540, $360. Those are all the prizes that we're offering. You should know that the prizes are already covered, and every dollar that comes in from the raffle goes directly to helping Jewish students. You're not paying for any prizes. So 100% of the $36 goes to helping Jewish life on campus. So please go to jewishucf.com/raffle. Or if it's easier for you, you can go to juicf.com/raffle, take you to the same place, and buy your tickets today. We are trying to still sell. As of right now, we sold 834 tickets. Our goal is to sell 1,500 tickets, which means we still are trying to sell another 660-something tickets. Our goal is to sell 1,500 tickets, and there's 16 days left. Sorry, I said 18 days. There's 16 days left, just over 2 weeks. Please help us reach our goal. Have a wonderful day. Hope you're enjoying your summer.